got some props, and
Okay, for those listening to the podcast, this is going to sound weird, but
yeah, it's going to sound
there's a
weird.
little hippopotamus, like a zoo
A little wooden
figure,
hippopotamus.
all right, yeah, and a very well decorated, used toilet roll. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton, and I'm joined with the wonderful Ashley Morland. I can never remember what side you're on, Ash. And today, a bit of an interesting episode that we've got. We were just talking about beforehand, keeping it together because you have to. Did I get?
Yeah, yeah.
So, are
So
you keeping it together, Ash? How's things going?
this came about because, as a parent, sometimes you just have to hold it together for your little people, right? And I had an experience. So we're recording this at the time we're recording this. It was my yesterday, but by the time it comes out, it's a couple of weeks ago. I
Mm,
was at the hospital with my youngest, and she had a viral induced asthma attack, and it was really scary. So it's always sad seeing your child sick. But then when it's your child sick who can't breathe, there's a level of scary that comes over the top of the
mm,
sad. And so I was already pretty emotionally heightened, and I just felt yucky in my body. I felt yuck. I just needed to burst into tears and just let myself feel what was coming up for me. But I took her to the GP, and he gave her the nebulizer and still said, nope, she needs to go to ER. So anyway, we're at the hospital and she's terrified of needles,
mm.
terrified of needles. And of course, she had to have cannulation. Well, she is
And that's where they put the
the
permanent
needle, yeah, the needle with
in.
the little plastic tube, the
Yeah,
bendy
yeah.
tube,
So
right?
they can put antibiotics or things through a bag.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
delightful.
anyways, uh, she is screaming, like screaming the house down, and she's bawling her eyes out and pleading, please don't do that. Please don't do that to me. I just want to go home. I don't want the needle. Please don't do that
Mm,
to me. And of course, what a really crappy situation to be in, because as her mum,
mm,
I know that she needs it because she needs the medical attention.
mm.
She needs the medical care. But also, as her mum, I just wanted to make her fear stop. I wanted to make her fear go away. And the easiest way to do that is just say, okay, we won't do it.
Mm. Was
But
there a part of you that sort of thought, "Is it that bad?
no,
Can we
not a
stop
single
it?"
part of me.
Okay.
There was not a single part of me that it was even an option on the table to not do it.
Mm,
Um, it was happening, but in that moment, it was like my heart was breaking. And I'm just as I'm
mm.
saying this out loud, it's reminding me of last year. My son had to have 4 teeth pulled at the dentist in the chair, and
Wow, that's a
yeah,
lot in one
four
visit in the
in
chair.
one sitting. They were going to do 8 in one go, and
Okay.
we called it and said, "Nah, 4's his tolerance for today." So, but I literally had to lay over him and hold him and comfort him, and he was frightened and whatever. It was a
Mm,
pretty crazy thing. But again, another situation where you're like, this is so crap. And if I didn't worry about the needs of my children and just focused on my needs in that moment, I would have been a mess. I would have been crying. I would have been walking out of the room going, I can't do this. There was all
mm,
that kind of stuff coming up for me, and I had those urges.
mm,
But you don't really get a choice. You just got to hold it together,
mm,
right? So I'm in the hospital, and I could feel this energy inside me that didn't want to hold it together, but I had no choice. So what was really interesting is the hospital recommended a video that I could watch with my daughter that took her through the process of what they're going to do and what's going to happen. And they did it on a
mm,
teddy. And so it really gave her certainty of
mhm,
exactly what to expect at every step of the way. Because all she went was needles. She immediately was having a trauma response of a previous horrific experience with a needle. I don't want a needle. She went into a trauma
Gotcha.
response.
Mm.
So we brought on certainty. Um, it I used some techniques that I had with her about what she was feeling in her body and what she needed to know to feel safe. And we went through step by step. And guess what? We got 2 needles. They had to do it a second time. And
Wow.
we got through it. But I still had this energy in my body. I was still filled with this like emotional dread,
Mm.
hurt, fear, frustration, sadness. Anyway, so the concept of an emotional orgasm might sound strange to some people,
Interesting. Because
but I
normally,
want to
normally
say,
it's pleasurable, right? Like,
well, I would argue that emotion orgasm is pregnant, is pleasurable.
okay, well, always remember practicing, safe emotions, people. You know.
um, so, what I got thinking about was the difference between having to hold it together because you have to in
Mm.
any given moment. And it might be in a work situation, it might be with your kids, because in that moment, my daughter, her okayness, she was taking her cues from me. I
Mm.
needed to send the message with my emotions, my body language, my voice, the words I was using. I needed to send the message that she was okay. Everything's okay. If I'm over there a blubbering mess, bawling my eyes out, then that's telling her it's not okay and there's something I need to be worried about.
Mm.
So I had to bypass my own emotional needs in that moment to prioritize her. So, what do we do with that? If we have to do that in some situations as adults, as parents, then what do we do with that? Because I can tell you right now, most people just get on with their life. Most
Yeah. So
people
at
just,
the time, what were you doing? Were you sort of dissociating or
no,
suppressing, or what was it that you were doing to get through? Because it sounds like when you say you didn't have a choice, well, I believe everyone's still got a choice, but the urge to protect your daughter and to be with
mhm,
her was just much greater than
yeah,
you know um, doing what your nervous system needed at the time or what was
hmm,
desirable at the time
hmm,
to kind of regulate your way through it. And so you made a choice,
yeah,
but it just sucked.
yeah. It was the
Like
choice that
it was
sucked,
sort of like,
totally.
would you like to eat the cow shit or the dog shit? And it's like, oh, okay, well, it's so. But how did you get through it at
Yeah.
the
So
time?
I think in the moment, I there's a when it comes to attention, what you focus on expands. And
Mm.
so I observed the feelings in my body and I even observed the compulsions that I had come up around like I wanted to leave the room. I wanted to go home. I wanted to make it stop. And I could feel those compulsions in my body. But if you can redirect your attention. So, what I did is I redirected my attention on her. I looked at her specific facial features. I looked into her eyes. I talked about her little chocolate eyes that I just wanted to eat because that's something that we do. She's got these
Mm.
beautiful, big brown eyes. And I say to her often, I'll say, "Oh, your big chocolate eyes, mummy's going to eat them." So, I redirected my attention to
Mhm.
her and her needs. And just because it's kind of like going, what have I got here? If you're watching the YouTube channel, I'm holding something up. But if I said to you, I just want you to tell me how many green stalks there are. Just count the little green pieces of grass. And then I took it away. And you were like, I'm absolutely certain there's 13 green little pieces of
Mm.
grass. And then I said, so how many purple flowers were there?
Yeah.
You go, I got no idea. Well, why haven't you got any idea? Because you weren't focusing on them. You were focused on the green bits of grass. And so our attention works in that way. So redirecting my attention, it was probably the biggest thing was
Mm.
the other stuff was still there. The feelings I was feeling, the compulsions I had was still there, but redirecting my attention to be focused on her allowed me to just not give that my attention, just to focus on her.
Mm.
I still felt it in my body. That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
important to know.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that was an in the moment thing. That's how I dealt with it in the moment. Some breaths, some regulating
Yeah.
back to the present moment.
And you were saying before, it's sort of like, now that was all done, how do you process it? Because
Mm.
I'm still curious to hear this emotional orgasm. Like I'm not going to let that go away.
Yes.
I want to hear about this. How does this translate to an emotional orgasm?
Yeah. So something that is really important. I've got some props, and
Okay, for those listening to the podcast, this is going to sound weird, but
yeah, it's going to sound
there's a
weird.
little hippopotamus, like a zoo
A little wooden
figure.
hippopotamus.
All right, yeah, and a very well decorated, used toilet roll. That's actually got like a really cute smiley face on it, big doe eyes, and couldn't tell you the gender, but
Doesn't matter.
exactly. So what do we what do we do with this? This is one of our craziest, It's a
I can't. I can't
we're
explain it
going to
without props.
ladies and gentlemen, we're going to explain an emotional orgasm with a hippopotamus and a toilet roll.
Yeah. 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 That
Don't
is
let
so
me stop
funny.
you.
All right. So to use words doesn't make a lot of sense, but with props, it's easier for me. So when I think about this, I've got happy, calm, regulated me. This is the one with the face. And happy, calm,
Hmm.
regulated me can experience and feel emotion. So happy, calm, regulated me can feel the emotions of fear,
Mm-hmm.
anger, sadness, hurt, grief, guilt, shame, embarrassment, whatever it is, jealousy, envy. Those emotions can come in and I can experience it like a wave. Yeah, a wave washing over me, but it's still me. I'm still me. Where a lot of people go wrong in their emotional regulation is over identifying with the emotion. So, what that means is that instead of me experiencing an emotion that's transient and only there in a moment, I let that emotion become me. And
I
so
like that.
here is angry me or scared me or irrational me. Now, the decisions that I make as this irrational, scared, angry, fearful person are going to be very, very different than the decisions that regulated, happy, kind, loving me would make. So, the reason that's important is because it's the difference between there's a lot of shame that comes about in the decisions when I identify with the emotion and I can't separate the like my actual identity of me with the emotion that the me is experiencing. It's I
Mm,
become that emotion. So in this case, I might shout, I might react, I might flip out, I might
mm,
leave the room, I might completely, whatever it might be, right? So there's behaviors that aren't in alignment with how I want to respond in the moment. These are reactive. When we have the capacity for emotional regulation, it means that I stay in my true identity, even in the presence of the emotions that I'm feeling.
and
So,
you could be more observant
yes,
as
yes,
opposed to fully embodying the
that,
emotions to the point where it informs your decisions,
yes.
your
You're not
actions. You can,
lost in it.
yeah.
Yeah. So you're not completely consumed by it,
Mm,
right? So the easiest way for me to describe it is in that hospital room, I stayed this version of me and I observed the emotion I was feeling.
while still feeling it, which is really
I still
important.
felt, yeah, I felt it.
You weren't numb. You
Absolutely.
weren't, yeah.
No, 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 no. I felt it. I was feeling it in the moment, but I was able to remain this version of me.
Mm,
That doesn't mean to say that that emotion just disappears and goes away. I still get to revisit that in a time when it's either forced. For me, for in an
mm-hmm.
ideal world, I would create the time and space to go back and hold myself and revisit it. For
Mm,
me, not an ideal world today. We started our morning with chaos, and I still had that emotion inside me. It was unprocessed
mm,
emotion. And so that unprocessed emotion bubbled to the surface until I erupted and exploded and straight away went, and I was bawling my eyes out and crying and going, I'm so overwhelmed right now and I'm at capacity and all this sort of stuff, right? So I literally stood at my kitchen sink this morning while my husband was standing next to me and I cried. And that is what I call the emotional orgasm, is when the emotion that comes out, there was nothing happening in my world in that moment
Mm.
that related to that called for that emotion, but it was an opportunity where something around me triggered it, which like it sort of opened the release valve. It was like, okay, here we go.
Mm.
And it was a safe space for me to release the emotion.
It's like the
So
final straw kind of thing.
totally, totally.
Mm.
And so obviously in an ideal world, you do that in a controlled environment where it's your choice.
Mm.
But any situation where that emotion's invited to come out in a healthy and safe way, I think is always a good thing. So I guess the question is, in people's experience of feeling those emotions, how self aware are they? And how much control do they actually have over whether or not they are consumed by the emotion and go
Mm.
into a completely reactive state, in which case they become the hippo? Or are they able to remain connected to their sense of self and observe the emotion as an experience of that self?
Mm.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Hopefully it does. My props make it make sense. I don't
Well,
want to be.
and for anyone watching YouTube, you've been all over it. For those in the podcast, the toilet roll with the face on it is the happy, calm, or the one that has capacity. The hippo, not that we discourage, hippos in any way, shape, or form, was the one that was, unprocessed emotions, I think is what you're sort of talking about. But so getting back to the what this episode is about, it's
Mhm.
being able to hold it together when we kind of say you don't have a choice, but you do. But the other priorities just are much higher. So your choice is to do it because it happens, and I think it's a bit of a theme, especially for myself at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on that I'm prioritizing, and if I had the world my way, it'd be going slightly different. And you sometimes have that thing where you just sort of say, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's, what I've been experiencing is probably what you've been experiencing. But instead of it being like a major event, because seeing your child not being able to breathe and that would be very triggering for any parent. But mine's been sort of like a whole lot of things that just keep on going on top and going on top and going on top. And then there's this,
Mm.
and then the smallest things just then start to set you off. So, a bit like you, a couple of days ago, I could not be anymore with any of this.
Yeah.
I'm over it. And so I guess that's what you're sort of saying, that actual process itself. And obviously it was a bigger process and it took a while, and part of me was observing it, but part of me really just wanted to be angry, which I felt
Yeah.
was, oh, that's still there for me. Okay, good to know.
Isn't
Um,
that so? Just on your language, there was a part of you who wanted to be the hippo.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
So the
wanted, I
difference is,
wanted, yeah.
yeah, the difference is I want to be angry, in which case I want to be the living, breathing manifestation of this
Mm.
emotion and I want to sit in my versus I want to feel this anger.
Yeah, which was quite interesting. The whole time it was observational, but it actually pissed me off that I couldn't deep into that. And I guess it kind of makes sense. When you get really angry and really pissed off and you start pointing fingers and going, this is unfair and this is crap. And, I've been doing all of this and it's my turn and banda, 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 banda. After that, you sort of go, wow, for those who smoke, have a cigarette. Like that was a great orgasm. Right.
It's total meltdown.
Yeah.
I think I was telling you about this one as well. I've had a few emotional orgasms recently, which makes sense as well because we've had so much going on in our world. But to cut a really long story short, my house is making me sick, and we have just found out
Mm,
it's going to be a very, very expensive fix. And so, if we sell the house, we're screwed. If we keep the house and fix it, it felt like we were screwed. So
mm,
um, then add to that, I felt like it was making me sick. I felt like it contributed to my daughter ending up in hospital. Like
Yeah.
there was so much to it. And I went into that. I was like, this and this and this and this. And again, wailing, crying. But most of it was irrational. Most of it wasn't real. Most of it was, I mean, even if it was real and you can't change it, it just bloody
Well, I
sucks.
mean, the feelings were real and
The
everything you
feelings
were
were real.
saying was real, but maybe the perspective was, a perspective that could have, you're looking at from a certain point, which felt unfair.
Yeah, but again, emotional orgasm. So the tension of all of these things builds and 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 builds until you release. And that was a more of a controlled release in that I had the space to be able to go, I am gonna explode and I don't want you to reason with me or rationalize with me. I don't want you to fix it. I don't want you to just tell me things. I just need you to hold space for
I,
me.
wa-
Can you do that?
I want this to be
And
messy. Just let it
and
be
I
messy.
yeah, and I just bawled my eyes out, and, I mean, the stuff that came out of my mouth was totally irrational for the most part,
Hmm.
but it was this feeling of being trapped and feeling of being taken advantage of and feeling of, like, all this stuff. As soon as that emotional orgasm was complete,
Hmm.
we sat down, we looked at our bank accounts, we looked at our numbers, we looked at how feasible it is to fix the house, we looked at
Hmm.
solutions, we talked about where we could stay in the meantime if we had to. We talked about, like, we actually had the
Hmm.
capacity then to look at some logical plans and start implementing and executing things.
Hmm.
Up until releasing the emotional charge behind everything that was happening, I could not even, it was like my face was so close to that problem. All the solutions are out here
Hmm.
and all the rationality and all the justifications are all out here, but all I could see through that charge of emotion that I was feeling was the
There
problem.
was no way out. There wasn't even any doors. There were just walls everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and so the emotional orgasm to the rescue again. I'm a huge fan of an emotional orgasm. I don't know if I've said on the show before, my car is my greatest therapist of all. If I'm feeling sad about something, if I'm feeling frustrated, if I'm feeling angry, I'll jump in my car and I'll just
Hmm.
lament, I'll scream, I'll release when I'm alone in my car.
Yeah. I mean, having your kids in the back, that could be a little bit more difficult to explain, but
Yeah, maybe don't do that. Do
but
you
it
find that your emotional releases are often triggered by a breaking point, triggered by something outside of you, or are they choices that you go, yep, I'm going to
no,
create this?
the first one. It's always that anything I do by choice. So my actions are. I've gotten to a point now where I can't be scared or feared into making a choice,
Mhm.
which has been probably the most proudest thing um, I can say about myself since starting this healing journey. If I had to sum
Yeah,
up what is the greatest thing that the healing journey's done, it means I'll never ever make a decision based on fear.
yeah,
Um, and so, with the fact that I do everything by choice and I'm following my gut or my intuition, which is always, well, not always, but it's challenging to dissociate or to have your head follow along. The ego, the certainty, the I want to know. If I could just know, then I can relax, as opposed to intuition, just having faith, believing, following, all of those things. So when there's this, well, sort of say conflict that kind of goes on, for the most part, I'm aware of the ego or the mind craving certainty and not necessarily get it, or the certainty that it gets is the best I can give you, mate, is everything's going to be okay. But
mm,
how, but why, but when, but it's going to be okay. This makes no sense. It's going to be okay. And for the most
mhm,
part, the intuition side, it, it's it's it it's a clear winner. It doesn't necessarily quieten. Well, it has quietened quite a fair bit, but it's still there. But a bit like a clean windscreen, right? If you've got a massive windscreen in your car and it's dirty and it's got bugs all over it, and another bug hits it, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. It's already
yeah.
dirty. You start to clean it and it's really clean, one bug hits it, it starts to annoy you.
Yes, I've never heard that before. I love that.
And so that's what I'm finding with healing at the moment. As I'm cleaning the windscreen, if I'm not at a very high achieving level, which I know is a judgment and all of these things, but still the ego that still sits there doing it, I feel as though that there's something I have to do, and there's, I need to keep on pushing through because I'm not completely healed, and I need to be at a much further place than where I am now.
Mm.
That still nags at me ever so quietly, but it still nags. So long part of this answer is, when I do all of these things, I do it by choice. But when it gets to a point where then suddenly actions and external things come in that then start to really fall in line with the narrative of my mind, then, and it gets a little bit more weight in it than I would like it to, that's when it tips me over.
Yeah.
When it sort of comes down to, there's one side saying, give me evidence you're doing the right thing versus just have faith. And especially
Mm.
when it comes down to, David, you can either go and do things like you're doing now, or you can go get a full-time job and have certainty in um, income or something like that. And then suddenly when things keep on building up, and a bit like, yourself, you suddenly get these bigger bills that are unexpected and things like that, you start to go, oh, and normally that's kind of the tipping point. So, but it's normally a build-up of things, but it's definitely not, I suppose, driven by choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I love that. There was so much gold in that. I don't even know where to start. That was
Get the
amazing. I feel like
get
I just need to go and chew on it for a little
yeah,
while.
get the pan out, start panning for it.
Yes, we really start panning for the little bits of gold that, yeah, after you've found the big chunks. I think
Mm,
that's really good. And, something that comes to my mind is when you say that it's a choice, and we've used the word observer and that kind of stuff in this episode. I think the biggest thing, if people were to take one thing away from this episode, from my perspective, I look at it and go, if you were really honest with yourself and observing yourself in your own life, how much control do you have over whether or not you remain present and anchored into who you are and how you show up in the world, who is feeling an emotion, as to how much you completely be consumed by that emotion and it controls your reactivity and your outbursts
mm,
and the way that you treat people and the things that you say and all that sort of stuff. Because I look at that and go, um, there are people in my life that I don't talk to about certain problems because I know that the only way they can respond is through embodying the emotion that comes up in them and reacting accordingly.
mm,
There's no ability to remain grounded in themselves, feel and observe what that is bringing up in them, but remain focused on serving me in that moment. It might be the difference between me sharing how I'm feeling and then being able to curiously go, oh, tell me more about that. What's that bringing up for you? What's going on for you? As
mm,
opposed to me sharing how I'm feeling, them jumping in, or that triggering a feeling in them, or feeling like they need to take my side or project or whatever it is, turning into the hippo and going, oh yeah, I would feel blah 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 and you should blah 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 and there, 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 there.
mm,
See how different that is? Whereas this person might feel those feelings and have an awareness of it, but they can park it and remain present and focused on you. And I find this particularly relevant in
mm,
grief and fear. And I find, yeah, I guess for me, it's I've had to learn through my healing journey who are my people that have the capacity to hold my big emotions without them jumping in the pot with me, because they don't
mm,
have the capacity to control it. And when I look at the example with my child, there was a time in my life when I didn't have the emotional regulation skills and the emotional regulation capacity where I would have lost it. I would have been crying. I would have been probably a train wreck.
mm,
But being able to prioritize her needs in that moment, park what I was feeling, and still let it come up later
mm.
in a more appropriate environment, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think for anyone who's sitting there going, well, how can I do that? I mean, it says it's great, stay observant, um, but it can be quite difficult and challenging when you have these big emotions.
Mm.
We've said it before, we'll say it again, stay curious. If you have to, a tool or a way to get started into that is to go, what is this actually bringing up for me?
Yeah, ask
And then
questions.
and then actually you ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm concerned about? And you'll start to realize that by being curious and asking yourself those questions, by default, you're now being observant, and the emotions are still going to be there, but now you know emotion isn't permanent.
Yeah.
This emotion is not permanent. So the more that you stay curious and ask yourself questions, it actually allows time for the emotion to move. It's not always going to be at 1,000%.
Yeah.
And so
Totally.
that's
Except, isn't it
certainly.
interesting that it's when the emotions at 1,000% where you're most driven to make change?
Oh, and who hasn't said stuff that they've wanted to say but haven't said, but then said it in such a way that is, like burning bridges
Yeah,
in
totally.
in that moment. And I think if I come back to your thing about emotional orgasm, that the incredible sensation I would get, it was a bit of a high of going on a, anger fueled rant, either at someone or at multiple things out there that was
Mm.
someone may have triggered. Like you come out of it and just sort of go, wow.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, um, the last time I had this, I couldn't, I don't care for this anymore. Part of me actually felt cheated. I couldn't get into that
Wow.
because it was sort of there. Okay, so I can't even get into this state. Okay, all right. I don't even have like I could. I was expressing. This was an internal monologue of things and thoughts and feelings and all of that, but I never got into the point where I could get into a rage or a way to actually fabricate things in my mind. This is what I would do. This is how I would do it. And you give yourself like a real ego boost or like a real
Mm.
boost, and you sort of, you know, um, stuff around and find out, or, everyone's against me. If everyone's against me, then you wait, you messed with the wrong person. And there's just this whole thing, especially for me, but I couldn't even get into it. There was bits there trying to start, but didn't even start, and I kind of felt like, oh, I'm missing out.
Yeah.
I kind of felt a bit cheated. But stay curious, people.
Yeah, I love that. I think curiosity is super important. And also, I would make the point that if you feel like, I do a process with clients called the FU process. And the FU process is really powerful because
Mm.
FU is an energy, and you all know what I'm talking about. You know, that real just "Arr!" energy, that FU,
We
that
can
energy.
beep, if you want to say it, Ash, it's a safe space. We can always beep it out.
That energy is real. That energy exists inside of you. That
Mm.
energy, it's not okay. So when you look at it, if you wrote down a list of everything that's frustrating you at the moment, or everything that's making you angry at the moment, that whole entire list is actually not what's going to make you sick. It's the energy of the emotion that is coming up in your body, that is unprocessed
Mm.
as a result of that list of things, that's actually going to make you sick. And so research has shown pretty clearly now, it's not about what's happening in your life, or what your circumstances are, or who's doing what or saying what or what's happening. That is irrelevant. It's how you feel in your body in response to those things that is the determination of whether or not it makes you sick. Because stress leads to toxicity and inflammation and acidity in the body.
Mm.
Ultimately, that makes every cell of your body sicker. And so, my thing with this is, if I can access the energy of the emotions associated with all of those circumstances, most of which I can't control anyway. I mean, I
Mm.
can't go back and plug the hole in my bloody shower that will mean it's not going to leak, which will mean that my floor's not going to be rotted, so that I don't have to feel upset and angry that now I have a rotted floor
An
at my
uninvited visitor
house.
camping
I
with you
I
called
can't
Mr.
I
Mold.
can't do that, right?
Mm.
I can't go back and change it. the emotion that I'm feeling around it happening has an energetic charge, and it's on me to release the energetic charge of the
Mm.
emotion about something that I can't change anyway. And if
So
I hold on to the energetic charge of the emotion, it's that emotion that causes the cascade of stress hormones that ultimately then leads the inflammation, acidity in my body and makes me sick.
yeah, gotcha. Because I've also heard, as you were saying that, it reminded me of emotion can or is or was or can be, taken as energy in motion.
Yes.
And if it's not in motion, you're constipated, and
Yeah.
no one's happy when they're constipated.
Yeah. And so what's
And
that? When we try and suppress and suppress and suppress and suppress and keep a lid on it, which is exactly what I was talking about. When you're a parent and you have to, or you ideally, for the sake of your kid, hold it together.
mm,
Just because you're suppressing it in that moment doesn't mean to say that it's not there.
oh, it's not. It doesn't need coming out. It's like containing
Yes,
an explosion. You've
exactly.
contained it for now.
Yes.
It still needs to come out, but sometimes it
Until
might come out over the smallest thing. And if you're with someone who's not capable of understanding it, they'll go, "Well, why are you overreacting over the fact that I didn't put the toilet
yes.
seat down?" or something
Yeah,
like that, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there's certain skills that come into the emotional regulation, as I said, to be able to choose that in the moment, to be able to observe what you're feeling and not become the feeling,
Mm,
but also the importance of recognizing that just because you have suppressed it through necessity in that moment doesn't mean to say that you didn't feel it. And if you felt it and you didn't resolve it, it's still there needing to be resolved. So that might be one of these big emotional orgasms because it builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up, and the pressure just builds until you explode.
mm,
Learning how to do that in a controlled environment, in a safe environment where my explosion, in order for me to eliminate the charge of the emotion in my body, I do not need to harm anyone else, either through my words or my actions.
mm. Because
I might have
if you hadn't done it this morning, then kids are at school. You do your work, and then you go pick them up. Chances are you're still going to be on a knife edge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And what was the second part to that I was going to say? So having a safe environment. I don't know. I was going
Yeah,
somewhere else
sorry
with
about
that.
that. But
That's right.
actually, it does remind me. Probably one last thing before we wrap this up is that I've heard someone say recently that they went to see their psychologist, but they were doing all they can to prevent themselves from having a meltdown,
Ah,
and so they went nonverbal for the
wow.
psychologist, and it turned into a session that they just went home early because they just couldn't talk because they were trying to hold it together
Yes.
from a panic attack. And my
Yes.
question to them was, when is it okay to have a panic attack?
Yeah.
Because if you can't answer that, then if you're constantly holding on to panic attacks, well, if you hold on to one, it's going to turn into many.
Mhm.
Or it's going to be, basically a tightrope. You're going to be walking a knife edge or whatever it is. When and where do you feel safe and confident enough to actually let it all out?
Yeah.
Melt the down.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna have
Express
a
the
panic attack,
anger.
if you're gonna have a meltdown, just let it burn.
Absolutely. Release the fear.
When
'Cause
when
that's actually processing adrenaline. The whole
yeah.
point of a panic attack and the whole point of a meltdown is to process the adrenaline out of your body.
Hmm. But
And
I
then how
guess
good do you feel at the end of it? You
so.
literally go,
Maybe
"Oh my gosh, I feel so much better."
yeah. So maybe as a parting gift to all of this, ask yourself, when and where is it safe for me to do this?
Mm.
Imagine if you were able to release it all out in a safe, controlled environment, what would that look like? And if you
Mm.
don't know what it looks like, because that's a challenging bloody question, then be curious about it. Start to think about, okay, who, when, and where? Is it by
Yeah.
myself? Does it involve a pillow? Do I need to
Yes.
have someone around? Do I
Yes.
have anyone in my life that has the ability to be able to cope and process this?
Yep. And
Um,
also what tools and what props, because
mm,
music is the biggest one for me. I know that if I
nice.
have a song and I can tell you exactly what it is, it's called Empty Heads Stick to Your Guns.
Okay.
So it's by Stick to Your Guns, and it's called Empty Heads. That song goes for just under 3 minutes. It's a song that I use with clients, and it's a song that I've previously used to myself. I don't really need music anymore because I
Mm-hmm.
can just do it. But when I am trying to access, especially rage and especially anger, having music that is at the frequency of that can really take you there. And it's like a drum beating inside you, just starting to
Mm.
shift and move and vibrate and shake it up. When that energy really starts moving, the emotion, the energy
Mm.
is the emotion, it starts moving, and that's when that pressure builds. And
Yeah.
so what I do sitting in my car is I let it build. Now the thing is, I might say the same things that I desperately want to scream at that person's face, except I'm not harming them in the process of moving through my
Mm.
energy.
Mm.
And
But you're
that's
still
where
saying it, just
we,
not at them,
yeah,
in
and
an
that's where we
uncontrolled.
have a totally, but that's our responsibility.
Mm.
It's our responsibility to feel the emotion, not become the emotion to someone else.
Mm. I love the music bit. Back in my day, it was either Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit.
Yes,
So-
yes, 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 yes. I remember that because we weren't allowed to swear when we were growing up, and there was, I think it was like the Mission Impossible theme song. Was that Limp Bizkit?
yeah.
And it had a swear word in it, and so
Dun,
I was
dun,
allowed to
dun,
listen
dun,
to that
dun,
song.
dun, 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 dun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah,
All right, guys. Well, it's been an
hilarious.
interesting one. We've covered everything from hippos, toilet rolls, and emotional orgasms. But hope you found this episode insightful. Um, and, we'll catch you next week. Is there anything else you want to say, Ash, before we wrap it up?
No, I would love, well, no, except I would love to hear from you, from our listeners. If you give this a go, if you try this, if you sit in your car and allow yourself to just scream, think of someone you're upset with,
Mm,
think of someone you're angry with, and I want you just to be alone, but imagine they're with you and just get everything off your chest. Scream it, feel it, cry,
mm,
scream, whatever, roar. See how much better you feel afterwards, and see how differently you can approach situations once you've already got it off your chest. That's
mm.
all I want you to do, and come back and tell us how you go with it.
In the comments, let us know. All right. See you,
See you
everyone.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.